All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode here on the Lure Lab, a part of the Serious Angler Network. And as always, I am your host, the Captain, Andrew Full. And today we have an awesome episode here for you, post Bailey's wedding. So I apologize that my voice is extremely hoarse. If you joined it on the Serious Angler Network Tuesday Night Live, we dove in and talked about Bailey's wedding a little bit. So we're not going to go there, but congrats to him and the missus. And it was a great time. But today we have an awesome episode for you. We have Brennan Chapman coming back in, the Do It Molds man. And we are talking on basically building your own bottom contact jig and building it from scratch and how to choose strands and just basically all out making this jig. And it's gonna be a really awesome episode. Like, this is something that we want to do more of here on the Lure Lab. So if you enjoy it, please let us know down in the comments if you're tuned in on YouTube. But and if there's any other Do It Mold episodes that you guys would like to see here, please let us know. But without further ado, let's get Brennan on here. Hey man, how's it going?
Doing great. How are you, buddy?
Hanging in there, walking a bunch, fishing every day, and living life,
Sounds
just
like the
trying to
dream,
survive.
dude.
Yeah, and I see you're back at the headquarters there, so there must be big things coming or something.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I'm always here, it seems like. But yeah, no, I like to think we got some good things in the works always. So yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate you having me on
yeah.
and
Like
look forward
like
to
I,
talking jigs.
we are talking offline. I think this is something that we need to do at least like every other month because there's so much to talk about with like the Do It Molds brand, right? Like just from pouring your own lead weights all the way up to total tackle creation and even pouring your own soft plastics. And I think it's just something that a lot more people, especially in the times of a struggling economy, to make things a little bit cheaper for everyone.
No doubt about it. Yeah, we have over 1,000 different molds in total. So there's honestly endless things to talk about.
Yeah.
Whether it's soft baits, like you mentioned, lead sinkers, lead jigs, swim bait heads, whatever it may be. There's endless things to talk about. So
And then
absolutely,
if they buy treble hooks, they can just buy them in bulk, right? Like just change
100%.
out
Yeah.
treble hooks. It's a
We
great way
we
to
are
save a bunch of
a we
money.
are a distributor of every main manufacturer of jig hook and treble hook. So yeah, we got lots of stuff to offer, no
Yeah.
doubt.
Amazing. So, and we say you want to jump right into this, like let's talk jigs, right? So, right off the start, why would someone want to build their own jigs and why should someone pour their own jigs?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to group this question into a couple different buckets of people just kind of observing our customer base and who makes tackle and maybe why. I think the main one for a lot of people is the cost savings aspect. So if you choose to build your own jig, if you have a premium hook, you might have 20 cents into your hook. Your lead, right? The material to catch itself. Um, Depending on where you get it from, and it's not hard to find recycled metals, recycled lead. Very low cost into that. All the componentry that goes into it, you're talking about again cents, not dollars. So all said and done, you can build a jig from, including your fiber guard, your hook, your lead, your skirting material. You're pretty well guaranteed to have less than $2 into that jig, versus paying $4, $5, $6,
Yeah.
um, which is not unheard of these days by any means. And it's only going to get more expensive as time
Yeah,
goes on, of
especially with
course.
like tungsten jigs, right? Like some of them
Sure.
are pushing $9, $12 depending on where you're looking and
Sure,
buying.
right. And we're talking jigs, right? Something that you're putting into not not great places, at
Yeah.
least if you're fishing where I'm fishing, right? So
Oh yeah.
you're putting that thing into some nasty stuff, whether it's rock, brush, whatever type of bottom composition or cover, right? Like if you're putting your jig in the right places, it's going into some generally pretty nasty stuff, and you're always accepting the risk of losing it. So to be able to make your own and not worry about snapping it off, right? Like that's kind of a big deal. Like depending on what part of the country you're in or what time of the year and what cover you're fishing, like you might be losing a jig every 5 minutes, like
Yeah.
literally, at least for me, fishing around the state of Iowa. Like it's not uncommon to lose jigs, 10 a day, right? Like
Yeah.
realistically.
Absolutely. If you're not putting it in the stuff, you're not catching the biggest bass or a limit of bass most times.
Sure, absolutely. So the cost savings benefit is huge, and that's why a lot of people elect to make their own jigs. I would say the next biggest thing on top of that, and personally me, probably my biggest reason is choosing your own componentry. So you can choose the hook that you want, right? Like you're not beholden to whatever brand of jig that you're choosing to buy. You're not beholden to that style of hook.
Yeah.
So you can experiment with hook styles, line tie angles, strength of hook, 1x, 2x, whatever. That's all interchangeable. So you get to select that. And then with that comes the customability, right? So you're able to select your own skirt colors. You can do some crazy stuff like this here for people that aren't watching and are only
Is
listening.
that just flash?
This is Flashaboo and round rubber brown, right? So this is a good bluegill and
So if
or
they saw
craw
it hit the
imitator.
bottom, it just
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, in theory, there might be a few manufacturers out there that offer something like that, but the point is you can choose all of it, right? Like if you wanted that Flashaboo instead of orange, you wanted it to be purple, blue, black, green, like you can do that, right? So we offer all the materials to match whatever forage, or maybe you're not trying to match a forage, you're trying to stand out and be completely different from the forage, right? Make something wild or flashy to stand out in dirty water or against bait, right? You can do that. So that's a big deal. A lot of people enjoy that, and that's why they choose to make their own tackle, is purely for the customability.
Yeah.
Which if you're a tournament angler, like that gets to be somewhat of a big deal from time to time. Maybe not all the times, but
there could be
oftentimes.
that one day that you need a brown jig with a hint of chartreuse in it, right? And if you're like, there's going to be that day that I need it, you can make your own jig, or after you made the jigs, you can make your own skirts and leave them in a box on the side and just switch them out through the day because you have the materials already at hand.
Sure, no doubt about it. Yeah, the interchangeability, being able to adjust on the fly, right? If you carry silicone pre-made skirts in your box, right, in your jig box, which a lot of people do, just being able to quick make an adjustment, slide a different skirt on, and go. That gets to be a big deal at times, at least, for sure.
Got it. So let's hop into the next question here, and we're gonna dive into like what is the best bottom contact jig mold that Do It Molds has to offer. But I also want you to elaborate if it's the best one for that, what also is like the best hook that you like to use in that mold. So
Sure.
the people tuning in can have like a general basis on where to start.
Yeah, no doubt. I would say for me at least, we have a multitude of jig molds, right? Bottom contact jig specifically. Our hybrid grass jig, for example, fantastic jig.
It's a great one.
Yeah, it allows you to treat your bottom contact jig as equally as you would a swim jig, right? Like you can steady, straight retrieve it, input some twitches with the rod tip and bounce it around, make it a swim jig. It's hard to argue against that one. We've got our Style S bass jig, which if you can see here, has a little bit of shape to it on the sides, right? And then it's also got the flat bottom. Fantastic one. There's a lot of guys on the Elite Series that are using this one. Fantastic jig. But I would say if we're purely talking bottom contact here, which I believe we are, our Arky style jig, right, which is what a lot of guys are throwing around the country at all times for fishing bottom, it's pretty solid. So it's got a double collar keeper system on it. So you can slide your skirt over top of this right here. And then it goes over the next collar and kind of locks in position. This is a really solid one. This is one that I'm throwing probably more times than not when I'm fishing. It
skips really well too.
It does, yeah. That's probably my favorite one, if I'm being honest. And then as far as hook selection goes, I can't go against the Gamakatsu 614.
That's a mean hook.
Yeah, really, really good hook. There's some really good alternatives too, whether, the nice thing about building your own tackle, again, is you get to select your own hook. So whether you're putting a Victory 10798, Mustad 32798. They're all good options. I tend to lead towards that Gamakatsu 614.
Now, is that a heavier gauge hook, or is it like a medium or a lighter wire?
Yep. So this one is just a 1X hook. So I'm in Iowa. I'm not battling against 10 pounders or even have the chance to hook a 10 pounder. I'm fishing for a 5, 6, maybe 7 at most if I'm incredibly grateful and lucky.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, absolutely. But the reason I like that light wire hook so much is on an absolute bomb cast, right? Like end of your cast, up on a point, up on a rock pile, whatever it may be. That light wire hook is going to give you so much better of a chance to land that fish versus a beefy 2X hook. There's absolutely a time and place for a 2X hook like this one here. That's a Gamakatsu 291. Fantastic hook, but that's not anything I'm going to want to make a mass, absolute long cast that I can. That's something I'm going to pitch into cover. I'm going to flip with shorter distances casts, right? Like something I can swing on, set the hook and flip it in the boat, but I don't want to bomb that thing clear out there on 14 to 18 pound test, because the odds of me sticking that hook in the fish's mouth and getting it in the boat go way down when that thing's at the end of your cast. A lot of times, like guys and girls listening probably know what I'm talking about. Like when you're, making an exponentially long cast, there's a lot of times too, like where those fish, they don't pound a jig. I know a lot of times they absolutely murder a jig and you feel it, like no questions asked, you got to bite. There's plenty of times where they just pick the jig up kind of subtly and you might not detect that bite, and maybe they swim off with it, or maybe you just feel it a little bit, but you don't get a great hook set in it. Your odds still are fantastic when you go with that lighter wire hook to get that fish in the boat versus that 2X hook. So on my long distance jigs, right, like my point jigs, my rock pile jigs, anything that I'm throwing clear out there, I want that light wire hook. And then, match your drag accordingly. If you're battling 8 to 12 pounders, like have your drag ready to go for that,
Yeah, so you don't flex it out. But I mean, even a 1X hook is still a pretty stout hook. It's pretty hard to flex it still.
Very hard to flex it. Yeah. You've got to be not paying attention whatsoever, right? If you're going to bend that hook out, in my opinion, at least, but it happens. We all get caught by surprise.
I will flex a hook out. I promise you that. So that is my job, it seems like, is breaking hooks and bending them out and losing fish.
There you go.
It's great. Yeah. It's a dangerous way to live. I'll tell you that.
That is dangerous, buddy.
So, all right. I guess now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of the episode. Like, we're going to dive right into the whole process of building a jig from scratch. So, for the viewers here, I'm not going to make you talk about it. First you have to pour it, but first you start with the hook and then you pour it. So go from pouring it, like choosing your hook, pouring it, and then what happens next?
Sure. Yeah. So you're going to select your mold, right? Let's just assume you're going with this, kind of basic Arky style jig, right? Mm-hmm. Very synonymous with what's out on the market right now. If you want this Arky style jig, right? It's pretty much right down the middle Arky jig. You select the mold, you select your hook. We make the hook selection very simple. We kind of tell you, hey, these are the hooks that are guaranteed to fit in there.
Yeah, and they're even on the mold itself, like the hook numbers.
They are. Right? Yep. So we make it pretty hard to screw up, right? So like you buy the mold. If you buy the mold and you don't even look at the we call it cast item details, which is telling you, hey, these are the hooks that we recommend for this mold. These are the hooks that are guaranteed to fit. If you don't even pay attention to that and the mold shows up in your mailbox and you're excited to pour and you don't even have hooks yet, we tell you in the mold what hooks are guaranteed to fit in there. And one thing to note is every mold that we offer, there's generally speaking a multitude of hooks to cast in that mold, whether you're a Mustad, Victory, VMC, Eagle Claw, Mustad, Gamakatsu, Owner, whatever your favorite hook brand is, like there's probably a hook that's going to fit in there. And I like to think we do a pretty good job on our website and our catalog which is free, by the way, if you want to request a
Yeah.
free catalog.
Yeah, make sure you click the link down in the description. I should have said that right off the hop there. You can click on the link down below. You can shop all through the Do It Molds website. And while you're there, make sure you request the catalog. It's great reading material.
It
So
is.
there's a ton of good stuff in there.
It
It'll open
is.
your eyes to a lot of things that they have to offer as well.
No doubt. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, whether you just purchase the mold and you don't even have hooks yet, like when the mold shows up, it's going to tell you what, at least a handful of hook options for that mold that we promise you will fit. If you jump on our website or look in our catalog, there's going to be additional options for some of that kind of more sneaky stuff that's probably going to fit in there too. So you select your hook. From there, you're selecting, your skirting material. You can do all sorts of crazy things with it, whether you want to use silicone skirting material, which is pretty traditional, or you want to use round rubber, something like this, right?
Yep.
Incorporate, Flashaboo, all these Flashaboo accent materials, things that are going to add flash in the water, which, by the way, is highly underrated. For people that don't currently use this, like, seriously look into this. This does make a difference, or it can at least.
One of my favorite jigs on that note is just a pure black jig on an Archie head, but with like bright blue flash of blue in it, just a little bit of it. And man, they chew that jig up
For
here
sure.
in the Northeast.
For sure. I myself am fairly partial, not always, but I do believe it makes a difference to use round rubber material, at least for bottom contact stuff.
And
Not so much.
why would someone want to choose round rubber over like your traditional silicone?
Great question. Yeah. So round rubber just has more bounce in it. It's more elastic. So it's got basically just more properties that allow movement for that in the water. So as this jig hits the bottom, that round rubber is just naturally going to want to move more. It's going to want to expand out quicker. So it's just got more response, I guess, is probably the best way to say it. It has more response in the water than a silicone material. If you think of silicone
tends to like gel up to the bait, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until you like kill it, and then I'll just kind of.
For sure. Yeah. Silicone, like I'm not knocking silicone by any means. There's a ton of benefits to silicone, and probably the biggest one being color selection, right? Like I will say one thing to be cognizant of if you do move towards round rubber is the lack of color, the lack of texture, the lack of depth. You're not going to get all these cool, crazy colors to be able to color match a bluegill, a shad, whatever it may be. It's pretty rudimentary, kind of straight down the middle. You get black, you get brown, orange, blue, right? You get the hint. Where silicone.
I was gonna say one thing I think that we should mention too, and this is a huge fish catching thing with round rubber and just color in general. It's more traditionally a matte finish to it. It's not like shiny like a silicone, correct?
For sure. And some people would argue that that's better. I'm probably one of those people that would argue that matted finish is probably more sought after, at least for me. In my experiences, I don't think that there's any real advantage to having that glossy, shiny finish. I think in more times than not, I would argue that that's probably a deterrent rather than a positive feature. But the main thing with the round rubber is you just get more bounce. You get more natural movement. You get more response underwater. And I think that leads towards more bites more times than not. So that's probably the third stage, if you will. After you buy your mold, you know what hook you want. Being able to hone in on that skirting material and get exactly what you want, whether that's round rubber or you're trying to match a very specific forage base, like this example here would be a swim jig. I know we're not talking swim jigs tonight. We're talking bottom contact, but I'm holding up a, kind of a green pumpkin, black and blue top layer. And then I don't know that you can see it that well because this jig has been chewed up so much. It's got purple and orange Flashaboo in it.
Yeah.
Just really imitating a bluegill. Yeah.
You must have crafted that one all yourself.
I did. I will take full credit for that. Yeah. Here's one that's, well, this one's pretty chewed up too, but you can kind of see it, right?
I might
So
have you make me a couple of those just in that color because it's your own handcrafted creation. It looks great.
we can make it happen, buddy. We can
I
make
know.
that happen.
That color looks real good. I actually enjoy throwing a swim jig a ton over here. Nobody does it really, so
It's
it's fun.
absolutely deadly. Absolutely deadly. That's probably my number one tool, at least where I live. Fishing around here is a swim jig. Fantastic search tool, fantastic cleanup tool, fantastic big fish tool. It
Yep,
does everything.
everything will eat it. So,
Hmm.
what's the next step?
After that, after you've selected your mold, selected your hook, you've tied on your skirting material, the next step would be a fiber guard. So the fiber guard is for people that don't know, it's the weed guard, right? In your weedless jig mold. We have a variety of different strengths and different strand counts. So these are going to vary based on how hard or not hard you need it to be. And you can kind of hone in on that based on the cover that you're fishing. So if you're fishing, really, really deep wood, right? And deep, I mean like not necessarily depth of the wood that it's sitting in, but like, you know, strength of wood, right? Like, are you fishing giant brush piles? Are you fishing little twigs, branches, whatever? You can choose the fiber guard to meet your needs. So, you might have, heavy cover jigs. You might have sparse cover jigs. You might have open water jigs that don't even have a fiber guard. That can be a big deal. So, choosing the right fiber guard to meet your need um, can make a key difference. So, we have different strand counts. So, if you're fishing heavy wood, right, like you're just flipping brush piles all day, probably want a higher strand count fiber guard. And we have a variety of different fiber guards to meet your needs based on your application. So,
Now, how do you put that into the jig head?
yeah, so that's really simple. The jig mold that you buy, I don't know how well you can see this.
Yep.
So the jig mold that you buy is going to come with 3 base hole pins. We call them base hole pins. The base hole pin is the component that's going to cast this void into your jig itself. And then from there, literally, you take a little bit of super glue, and I generally do this after I tie my skirting material because it's a lot easier to tie them
Yeah.
and or slip on, whether you're tying jigs or you're just using a skirt collar with a pre-made skirt, something simple. You push it into place, and then kind of the last step generally for most people would be to adhere your fiber guard. And you can use epoxy, you can do whatever you want, but honestly, the fastest, easiest resolution is to just put a little super glue on there, and then you just literally pop it into place, and then you've got your jig, right? So that can be a big deal, right? Just selecting the right fiber guard for your need. And then, of course, afterward, like you can trim it up, do whatever you need to do. But yeah, that's
That's
all
good.
it is.
That is good. Great advice. I appreciate it. So, now we've gone through the process of making our own jigs. Like, when people want to customize jigs, I think this is a beautiful thing as well. When you're selecting your skirting material, you can change up like the strand counts and choosing like I'm trying to formulate the best way to ask this question. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you go about choosing the proper skirting material besides like living rubber or silicone, but also like when you're building a contact jig, bottom contact jig, how do you know what the proper amount of strands to put in that skirting material is to make it either bulky or less bulky or natural flowing? Like, how do you choose personally?
Sure. Yeah. And that's a tough question to ask, and it's a tough question to answer
Yeah.
because it totally depends on the day. And it totally depends on kind of the climate or personality of your fishery. Um, but thankfully, if you pour your own jigs, like you can dictate that, you can have a multitude of jigs and strand counts ready to go at all times. So, for example, here, like I've got a nice little bluegill jig, right? Like looks just like a bluegill. This is probably two tabs total, maybe 2.25, 2.5. You'll hear a lot in fishing, right? Like 50 strand, 60 strand count in the jig world. They're pretty common. There's really no right or wrong answer, right? It depends on the day. It depends on, like I said, the personality of the lake, the personality of the fish. Some bodies of water are far more stingy than others. I tend to generally lean towards the lighter side of strand count, whether that be, a round rubber jig, something like that. Like you can see this one here, very, very sparse. That's generally what I like. And then this one here, maybe a little bit more fuller, but again, no more than two full tabs on that one. Maybe a tiny bit more, but not much. Totally depends on the fishery. Totally depends on you and your style of fishing. If you lean towards the finesse side of jig fishing, or just fishing in general, probably go towards a lighter strand count. And then, adversely, if you're more of a power fisherman, you're fishing for that one giant bite. You like that mop style jig, load that thing up with tabs, right? But I would say between that 50 and 60 strand count is pretty common in jig fishing, and it just totally depends on what you prefer, right? So that is the benefit to making your own tackle, is you get to select that versus buying a pre-made jig and then having to trim it down and it looking really weird when you get done trimming it up. And nothing wrong with it. I do it too. I trim up jigs all the time. But if you can dial it in ahead of time, it always looks a lot better, way more presentable.
So I prefer, like, if a jig comes in the box, I want that strand like extra long, because I like to trim it myself based on what trailer I'm putting on and the conditions of the day. And I think that's one of the best things about this is the fact that you could literally trim them and label them in your box and have them all ready to go, short, medium, long, thick, thin, based on your trailer fall preference. Because that's another thing too. Like if you have a thinner skirt material, a lot of times a 3/8 ounce thin skirt material jig is going to fall a lot faster than maybe even a half-ounce jig with heavier.
No doubt. Yeah, your fall rate is going to differ, and then I would argue beyond that, maybe the most important thing is the action that you're freeing up in your trailer varies significantly based on your strand count. If you've got this really, really full profile jig, no matter how big your trailer is and no matter how far it's protruding past your skirt, naturally it's not going to offer the same action that it would if you had a sparser skirt. I'm not saying one is better than the other because it depends on any given day and frankly any given fish, but having that lighter skirting material oftentimes is going to free up that trailer. It's going to give it more action, and some days, like I said, that's good, some days that's bad, but being able to make your own jigs, you're ready for either scenario.
Now, this is going to be a fun one, and I'm wondering if you know the answer off the top of your head. And those who have the Do It Molds catalog can go and count if they like. But how many strand colors roughly are there that you can buy in skirting material between silicone and like the soft rubber?
Oh man, dude, I
But
you just embarrassed me because I do all of our purchasing and everything, so I should know this, but
I should have warned you, but I figured it'd be a really good one to throw in there at the
end. I can tell you there are well over 100 different silicone different colors, right? So like this jig that I'm holding up, for example, I can look at it and tell you there's 4 different colors of tabs in there, right? I can promise you that in the silicone category, there are probably 40 to 50 fold more different color options than in the round rubber variety. I know that sounds bad for the round rubber category, but just don't underestimate what round rubber can do.
Yeah,
There's
especially in a
far
man.
less colors available, but don't underestimate it.
You heard it from the man himself. He is a round rubber guy. And I won't even lie, like there are times that I love round rubber, and one of them is like a football jig. For whatever reason, I feel like
Absolutely.
if you incorporate round rubber into a football jig, you just get way more bites.
For sure.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I would argue in any style of jig, like if it's touching bottom, generally speaking, not in all cases, but for me, if it's touching bottom, I probably want round rubber over silicone.
I love it.
Swim jigs, spinner baits, other wire baits that have skirting materials, like
Silicone all day.
silicone all day. But if it's touching the bottom, I probably want round rubber if I can get away with it.
That is a great tip. And before we end it here, is there anything else do you, that you think our viewers should know about building their own custom jigs?
I would say if you're on the fence, if you've been thinking about it for a while, or maybe this is brand new to you and you didn't know anything about it, do a little bit of research. We have a ton of videos on our website that kind of outline the full tackle making process. Watch some videos, spend 5 minutes, watch a few videos. It's called our How We Do It video series. Um, you know, See if it's for you. It doesn't take a lot of time. It does cost more money on the front end, right? Like if you're going to make Arky jigs, right? For example, something we've talked about here since the beginning of the show, I feel like Arky jigs. If Arky jigs is your thing or whatever it may be, whether it's a drop shot sink or whatever, you might spend $200 now to get into it, but the savings on the backside are exponential. It's not difficult. It really isn't. And we have a giant library of videos that are dedicated to teaching you every single step from A to Z to make exactly what you want. Take a peek at that. If it's something you're interested in and you're still not sure, request a free catalog on our website. You'll get a catalog in 2 weeks and you can just kind of dive in and see everything that we have to offer. And I promise you, once you get that catalog in your hands, maybe you don't want to request one because it is dangerous.
Very dangerous.
It is dangerous. Just check it out. See if it's something that you're interested in. It's a great time. For us northern guys. I'm an Iowan. I'm a northern guy. It's something to do in the winter, and you can stock up. And I promise you, once you start making your own jigs, you'll never buy another store-bought jig again.
And it's kind of addicting too, just sitting out there pouring it, and then
it's therapeutic and addicting. Yeah.
And you can almost fantasize about like some of the color combinations that you can put together, especially when you start getting tabs with get brown tabs with like a little bit of orange in it, and you want to make like a rusty craw color jig. You can really go crazy with like a rusty craw color based on the tabs that are
and you can start selling them to your buddies too.
Especially if you get one that wins a derby, they're all going to want that jig. So
yeah. Maybe you don't want it. Maybe you don't want that jig to get out.
Yeah.
If you're the one winning the derby, anyways, don't leak that. But
fair enough.
Yeah,
it's a great point. Well, Brennan, I want to say thanks, but one last thing here: are those videos on the Do It Mold website, or are they on YouTube so people know where to go find them?
They are both on the Do It Molds YouTube channel and on our website. If you're on our website and you see the header on the top, it'll say Learn.
Yeah.
Click that, select How We Do It videos, and then whether you're interested in soft baits, lead, whatever, frequently answered questions, general subject stuff, like we've got everything. And then on our YouTube channel, it's just Do It Molds on YouTube, and then we've got the same library on our YouTube channel. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So hopefully some of our viewers switch over and go learn how to pour their own jigs now. And that sounds like there's a ton of content out there available for you to figure out how to do it, not just on your own, but to have a helping hand on the way. So that's awesome.
We try to make it easy.
Website. I get lost looking at everything that's on there. So it's
easy to do. Yep.
It's very easy. So, well, Brennan, thanks again. And we got to start brainstorming what the next one of these will be, but I'm hoping some of our viewers comment and tell us what they want to see to make it a little bit easier for us. So until next time, dude, thanks, and enjoy your smallmouth trip extravaganza you have coming up. You're going to
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Hey, anytime. the floor is always yours. So we'll chat soon.
Thanks.
Have a good
See you
one.
later.
Yep. Bye. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning into this week's Do It Molds episode here about building a custom jig on the Lure Lab. We appreciate everyone who tunes in on a weekly basis. Every one of you rock. So if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button if you're new here. If you're not new here, please leave a comment down below if you create your own custom jigs and maybe which one that you like to pour and build, and maybe even skirting material if you want to give up some juice. We greatly appreciate it. If you're on an MP3 podcast platform like Spotify or Apple, please leave a review because that allows this podcast to be seen to more people who love fishing like us. So until next Saturday, we will see you then.